In today's lesson, you will learn 30 common and useful phrasal verbs that you can incorporate into your active vocabulary. I will give you the meanings of the phrasal verbs and plenty of examples. Let's get started. Let's look at this everyday phrasal verb to turn up. Now I'm going to show you the two most common meanings for this phrasal verb. Meaning number one, to increase the volume or intensity of something. For example, the radio is a little quiet. Can you turn it up, please? Quick note, the opposite is simply to turn down. Meaning number two of turn up, to appear or to arrive. For example, she finally turned up an hour late. We use this a lot when somebody arrives late. We would usually say to turn up late. Example number two, with an object that is lost and appears without really looking too much for it. I can't find my keys. I hope they turn up. Set off. Now you can also find this in my video about daily routine phrasal verbs, and I'll put that in a link for that for you as well. So the meaning that I think you need to know, or you're most likely to need, is to start a journey. If your train leaves at 8 a.m. tomorrow, what time do we need to set off? Or my brother sets off for work at 7 a.m. every day. So put forward. Now the key meaning for this one is to propose, offer or suggest something or someone. Usually it's something, but you can also put yourself forward or put somebody forward. So let's have a look at some examples. Example number one. It's an excellent idea. Why don't you put it forward at the next meeting? Yeah, so the person is suggesting that they propose their idea, they offer it as an option. And the second example I have for you here is nobody else offered, so she put herself forward to represent the company at the business fair. So here she is offering herself or suggesting herself as the best candidate to represent the company. Get on with. Meaning number one, if you get on with somebody, this is to have a good relationship with them. So, how's your new job? Do you get on with your colleagues? So I'm asking if you have a good relationship with your colleagues. Yeah, how is the relationship? Hopefully it's a good one and you get on with them. You can also say, I get on well with them. They're very nice people. And meaning number two is to get on with something. And this means to continue doing something or to make progress with it. For example, oh, I'm terribly sorry, but I can't talk right now. I have a deadline pending and I need to get on with some work. Okay, so there you're saying I need to make progress with or to continue it and I can't really be interrupted. Let's take a look at the two main meanings of to move on. Meaning number one is to leave somewhere in order to go somewhere else. For example, I have been working here for 10 years and I need a new challenge. It's about time I moved on. Meaning number two, stop talking about or focusing on one thing and start talking about or focusing on something else. For example, we've been talking about this point for nearly an hour. Let's move on to point three. You can also say moving on to my next point and then introduce that next point, and you can use this as a connector in presentations or exams. So move on is a fantastic usable phrasal verb. And come along. And as always, I'll give you the two most common meanings. So meaning number one is to come with someone or to accompany someone. For example, we're going to the cinema tonight. Why don't you come along? To invite somebody to join you or to accompany you in whatever you are doing. And the second common meaning is to make progress. This is really common in a business context. The example here is your latest project coming along well? So I'm asking about the progress of your project, and you could reply, yeah, it's great, it's coming along nicely. So this is an interesting one because it can be used literally, and this is meaning number one. It's to collide or hit something by accident. So he felt so dizzy that he bumped into the door frame. Yeah, so he literally collided with his body with the door frame. He bumped into the door frame. And meaning number two is to meet someone by chance. For example, I bumped into your cousin at the supermarket the other day. Okay, so I didn't literally collide with the cousin. I saw them, I stopped and said hello, I made some small talk, some polite chat, and then we continued on with whatever we were doing. It wasn't a planned meeting. We hadn't gone to meet for a coffee or anything like that. Set up. So let's take a look at some examples. Meaning number 1 is to establish or found an organization or business. So my sister set up a marketing firm last year and her business is coming along nicely. Remember the phrasal verb come along from before? Have a look in the playlist if you haven't seen it yet. Meaning number 2 is to assemble, prepare, or organize. Where should I set up my laptop and flip chart to give the presentation later? Yeah, so this is to physically prepare and to assemble the laptop and the flip chart. And just a quick extra note, set up is separable. So if you're going to use it with the pronoun, you will have to say, I set it up. Yeah, get over. And its meaning is to recover from something and finally feel better. Now, you can get over something physically or emotionally, so it could be an illness or a bad experience. Now, we usually focus on the length of time it takes to recover from something. So here are some examples. It took me about a month to fully get over the flu. I felt under the weather for weeks. Example number 2. When she ended their relationship, he was heartbroken. It took him a year to get over their breakup. Figure out. Now, I've got 2 meanings here because according to the Oxford English Dictionary, there are technically 2 meanings, but they're kind of similar. It's all about understanding and calculating something. So meaning number 1 is to understand something after thinking about it for a certain amount of time. So he finally figured out why his wife was annoyed with him. Meaning number 2 is to calculate or solve some sort of problem. Have you figured out how we can meet the deadline? To put off. Now this can have a few different meanings. I've chosen the most common ones, as always, the most useful ones. So meaning number 1 is really good to know, is to postpone or to delay something until a later date. For example, I'm completely snowed under at work, which means very busy. Would you mind if we put off our get together until next week? Yeah, would you mind if we postponed meeting? Meaning number 2 is to make someone not like something or someone. For example, his rude behavior puts people off. No wonder he has so few friends. I know the food looks a bit strange, but don't let that put you off. It's delicious. One last note, put off is a separable phrasal verb. So the tricky thing with get by is the different prepositions that you can use with it, but we'll have a look at those. That's why there's so many examples for you today. So first let's look at the meaning, and it means to manage, survive, or cope with a limited supply of something. That could be knowledge, skills, tools, money, etc. Example number 1, if you live in London, how high a salary do you need to get by? No preposition. When I was visiting Berlin, I managed to get by in basic German, to get by in a language. She's a student, so she has to get by on very little money. To get by on money. Get by on a low salary, get by on £100 per week. And the last one, I only have some basic tools to do the renovation. Do you think I can get by with them? So there's an example of get by with some equipment or some tools. Is it enough? Can I cope with these tools? Draw on. This is a good one because it's common in real life, and I've also seen it many times in exams, specifically the Cambridge exams. I've seen that coming up many times in the first certificate and the advanced. To draw on means to use something as a resource. And one important note about draw on is that it's actually an inseparable phrasal verb. So even if you use it with a pronoun, you're going to say draw on it or draw on them. And the types of things that we tend to draw on are things like knowledge, experience, skills, or it could be something physical like money. Let's have a look at some examples. She drew on her experience as a manager when she was dealing with a difficult employee. Or if I lost my job, I would have to draw on my savings until I found other work. To cut out. And this means to eliminate. Basically, it's a really common way for us to say eliminate. It would sound strange to use eliminate in these contexts. It just sounds a little too formal, I would say. So let's have a look at cut out in context. So example number 1 is, in January, many people try and lose weight and cut out junk food. Yeah, you can also say cut out junk food from their diet. Okay, example number 2, buying takeaway coffees every day can get expensive. If you want to save money, you should cut them out of your budget. So as you can see, cut out is a separable phrasal verb. So when I've used the pronoun them, I've had to put it in the middle of the phrasal verb. And I think the most common and the most useful meaning of get away with is when we mean to do something wrong and not get caught or punished for it. Okay, so for example, you'll never get away with speeding. There are speed cameras everywhere. So if somebody's in a bit of a hurry and they're hoping to catch their flight, and you think, well, on that particular road, there are speed cameras everywhere. You will not get away with speeding. No way. And speeding is dangerous anyway, so you shouldn't do it. And another example, I can't believe you managed to get away with that. You're very lucky the boss was in a good mood. So in this case, maybe the person got caught but didn't get punished for the offense that they committed because their boss was in a good mood that day. Up on. So it means to get up to date or to spend extra time on something because you have fallen behind, right? So some examples. When I got back from annual leave, I had lots of work to catch up on. Yeah, so while I was away, it built up and it built up. And so when I got back, I had to catch up on it. And example number 2, I'm not making any plans this weekend because I need to catch up on my sleep. We have catch up with. So there are a couple of meanings for catch up with, and these are the 2 that I think are most essential. So let's take a look. Meaning number 1, to exchange news with people, especially when you haven't seen or heard from them for some time. So Christmas is always the time when I catch up with my family. Or it was so lovely to catch up with you yesterday. Maybe you had a chat by phone and you send them a follow-up message the next day. And then meaning number 2 is for past actions to finally have their consequences. For example, his bad eating habits finally caught up with him when he started to have health problems. Narrow down, and this means to reduce the number of possibilities, choices, or options. Let's look at some examples. Example number 1. We have received so many strong applications for the job, it's going to be difficult to narrow them down to just the 5 strongest candidates. So I put the last part in brackets because grammatically you don't need it. You can stop after to narrow them down, but it just gives extra information. So it's there to show that. And the second example, for her holiday this year, she has narrowed down her options to Spain or Italy. Rule out, and it means to exclude, eliminate, or make impossible. For example, after narrowing the candidates down to just 3 people, they decided to rule out Sam due to his lack of experience. Example number 2, they ruled out Australia as a potential holiday destination because the flights were so expensive. They're going to have a look at the meanings of bring in. So first of all, it can be to bring something in, and that means to introduce something, usually a new law, a rule, or a ban. For example, the government plans to bring in new tax legislation next year, or the new boss brought in a strict dress code. And the second use of bring in is when we use it with somebody, to bring somebody in, which means ask somebody to do a job, usually an expert or something like that. It's time we brought in a consultant to see if we can increase our sales. When we offered him the job, he asked if he could bring in his own team of sales representatives. To phase out, and let's have a look at its meaning. So it means to gradually withdraw or eliminate something. For example, it seems petrol and diesel cars are being phased out. Meanwhile, electric vehicles are being phased in. So as you can see there, the opposite to phase out is to phase in, to gradually introduce something. And also take note that this phrasal verb is often used in the passive, and I will give you an example of how it might be used in the active voice. The government is phasing out tax breaks for large companies. So it's gradually eliminating these tax breaks, not all in one go, because that would be controversial. So to gradually phase something out, to eliminate it bit by bit. To do away with. So it's another 3-word phrasal. And this one means to get rid of or to stop doing something. For example, they are doing away with the old paper driving license and now everyone will have to change to the new type. The meaning here is that they are no longer going to produce the old type of driving license and therefore they are doing away with it. Example number 2, don't you think it's time we did away with all this red tape so that the process is more simple for people? If you don't know, red tape is a figurative, informal term for bureaucracy. Live up to, and this means to be as good as something. It's quite interesting because it has just a few collocations, I would say, in real use. And we can see the most common one in the first example here. She knew that she could never live up to her parents' expectations. Okay, so to live up to somebody's expectations is a really common collocation with this phrasal verb. The second example, they tried to live up to their teacher's high standards. Okay, so in this case, it's standards instead of expectations. Or, I hope you can live up to the promise you made me. So basically, you've made a promise and I hope that you will be as good as the promise that you made, whatever that promise is. To carry out means to perform or complete a job or activity. For example, the job involves carrying out several small projects per week. A new risk assessment should be carried out to avoid any accidents happening. And the final example is she carried out appropriate reference checks before offering him the job. So bring forward. The meaning of bring forward is to make something happen at an earlier time than planned. And you may recognize this as the opposite of the phrasal verb to put off, which means to postpone. So let's look at some examples of bring forward. As most people cannot attend the meeting at 5 p.m, it has been brought forward to 3 p.m. It was a surprise when the Prime Minister announced that the general election had been brought forward by 2 months. Okay, to put up with means to accept or to tolerate something or someone unpleasant. For example, I can't put up with the neighbour's music any longer. I'm going to ask them to turn it down. So in this case, I cannot tolerate the neighbour's music. Example number 2. Do we have to have dinner with them tonight? I find it hard to put up with him when he has too much to drink. So in this case, you can't tolerate a person and not a thing. And this is an interesting one because it has so many meanings, and I always try and choose the most useful or the most common ones to give you. And I just couldn't narrow this one down. Do you remember that phrasal verb? To less than 6. So I actually have 6 meanings for to go down. Meaning number 1 is to simply to go lower or fall. The price of petrol went down at the beginning of the pandemic because there was an oversupply of oil. Meaning number 2 is to set. When we talk about the sun, we sat on the beach and watched the sun go down. Meaning number 3 is to be reduced in price, quality or level, etc. This is kind of similar to meaning number 1 actually, but I'll give you another example. The quality of the clothing from that store has really gone down since they changed supplier. Meaning number 4 is to stop working temporarily, for example, a computer system. When the system went down unexpectedly, we lost a lot of important data. Meaning number 5 is to be received in a particular way. It didn't go down well when she told her parents she had failed her exam. And meaning number 6 is to be remembered in a particular way. I think he'll go down in history as one of the greatest artists of our generation. As you can see, in history there is optional, but it's such a common set phrase, it's good to know. And that means to give something to each member of a particular group. For example, the teacher handed out the exam papers to the students 5 minutes before the start time. Or the government is going to hand out grants to new parents to try and improve the country's birth rate. And let down is a fantastic B2 upper intermediate phrasal verb. It's a must know if you're planning on taking any exams at that level. So let's have a look what it actually means. So if you let somebody down, you disappoint them by failing to do what you agreed to do or what you were expected to do. For example, she went to medical school even though she didn't want to because she didn't want to let her parents down. Or, I've studied hard because I don't want to let myself down in the exam. So as you can see, you can also use it with myself, himself, themselves as well. Cheer up. So you can simply cheer up or you can cheer somebody up. And it means to feel happier or to make someone feel better. Maybe they don't look too happy and you can cheer them up by telling a joke or giving them a hug or whatever you think they might need. So, for example, the little boy cheered up when his mother gave him an ice cream. Or you look a bit down. What can I do to cheer you up? Down here means unhappy or a bit sad. And the last one, watching a good film always cheers me up. So if you found this lesson useful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. I will also leave a link for you to take a look at my playlist completely dedicated to learning phrasal verbs.